I'm Riley. On behalf of Godmothers, welcome to our living room. This space has been nurtured to celebrate exceptional storytelling and connection, and we're so grateful you're here. Your presence is what truly brings it to life. First, I'm delighted to introduce Jennifer Rudolph Walsh, co-owner of Godmothers and a fairy godmother to many, a literary agent formerly and forever a literary extraordinaire. Jennifer's wisdom, warmth, and creativity have shaped this community in immeasurable ways. She will be guiding tonight's conversation. Sloane Crosley is our featured author this evening. She's the New York Times bestselling book of Grief is for People, as well as How Did You Get This Number? And I Was Told There'd Be Cake, which was a finalist for the 2000, everyone laugh, chuckle. Thank you. Which was a finalist for the 2009 Thurber Prize for American Humor. She's also the author of Look Alive Out There, a 2019 finalist for the Thurber Prize, and the novels Cult Classic and The Clasp. Deep breath, it's a lot. Her work has been translated into 10 languages and featured in a multitude of collections. I almost listed them, but then we'd be here all night. But the Library of America's 50 Funniest American Writers and the Best American Non-Required Reading are two of them. She's a contributing editor at Vanity Fair, and her writing has appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Review of Books, The New York Times Magazine, Vogue, and The Guardian. Sloane has also taught in Columbia University's MFA program and has been a guest teacher at Dartmouth College and the Yale Writers Workshop, and she lives in New York, so we're very lucky. Tonight, we're celebrating Grief is for People, which has been named a Best Book of the Year by countless publications, another long list. A contemporary elegy, it's a frank, wickedly funny, and deeply empathetic exploration of loss, asking, how do we live without the ones we love? I do feel it's necessary to say, Sloane Crosley, thank you for writing this book. And to our lovely guests, please enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our living room. And Sloane, welcome.
I feel like a little kid.
I know,
Hi.
right?
Hello. This is on? Yes.
Yeah,
you're
wonderful.
good. Hi, everyone.
You're so good.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, there's a. Yeah,
I mean, the polka dots are not helping. Okay, here we go.
You got it?
Yeah.
See
Good.
how helpful our audience
so
is?
helpful. What a community. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so
To
much
Courtney
for being
and Riley
here.
and everybody.
Thank you
It's
so
been
much for
amazing.
being here and for writing this beautiful memoir. I was thinking on the way over here how somebody once told me a quote that said, like, I sat with my anger long enough and she told me her real name was grief. And that really hit me. And it was something that I was thinking about, how it kind of you process emotions, and it's almost like you're learning to name what you're feeling through this process. So I think my first question for you is, before your perfect storm, and we'll talk a little bit about what that perfect storm was made of before, for those of you that weren't here, what did you think of when you thought of the word grief?
It's funny. I mean, it's interesting. So I'm going to two actually like diametrically opposed places, because I think it's the other side of love, right? You miss things because it's you grieve in proportion
question.
to how much you
Without
cared.
question. I mean, that's a fact. But the anger connection I thought was interesting, because we don't think of anger as being part of unprocessed grief.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that, it's funny. So the book is very loosely in a sort of, tongue in cheek is too light a sort of expression for it, but sort of divided into the 5 stages of grief, which on a side note, I should get out of the way. For those of you who don't know, a lot of people seem to have known this. I didn't know before I started writing the book. They don't make sense, and they are not linear, and they go back and forth. But part of the reason is because they are not for anyone in this room. They are for the dying person, the person who has something to bargain with, to deny, to be depressed by.
Yeah, that does make
They're not
sense.
for us. So that's
They're not
why
for the grievers.
Yeah, and that's why they don't fit. But the most difficult section of this book was anger, because I felt it wasn't coming. My friend died, and I didn't feel angry. And honestly, now that it's in paperback, it literally has taken about this long for me to understand that this is an extremely angry book. Mm-hmm. That sounds weird. It sounds like you're not going to buy it.
No.
But there's an engine to it. Where
I felt that, and that's what brought up this quote for me. Because
where I was like, he's going to be forgotten, and I'm mad.
And I've got it right.
Yeah.
So what happened in 2019?
Yeah. Well, I was born on a dark and stormy night. We're going to be here for a really long time.
Don't skip anything.
You guys have no dinner plans. It's fine. Okay, so in 2019, I'm going to look at them since you know.
Yeah.
So in 2019, on June 27th of 2019, I left my apartment for 1 hour to go get a hand x-ray. This really will be the longest. No, I'm kidding. I came back an hour later.
Did you take the subway?
I know, I did
walk?
a subway.
Was there a bus
what
involved?
happened? There was an MRI. You know, they do the thing.
What were you wearing now?
This. This is what grief looks like. I just am still wearing the same thing. No, but I left the apartment for 1 hour. And part of the reason this is relevant is because to get a hand x-ray, you take off all your jewelry. And in that time, someone broke into my apartment in the West Village. They crawled in through my bedroom window, left muddy boot prints on my bed, which was very rude, and took all my jewelry. And I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, I am not bait. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like a Kim Kardashian. Yeah,
you're not
tiara,
Kim Kardashian, right?
Like
exactly.
thing, you know. But so it was a real mystery as to why this happened. I was the only apartment hit with this lovely felony. And I complained about it quite a bit to everyone, including my old boss, who I used to work for at Random House, who had become really my best friend over the years.
And who I knew.
And who you knew.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
We'll get to that. This is all a small world because you
It's
guys
a small
don't hear
world.
me talk about my life in New York before Godmothers, but
it was quite a big life that she had in New York before Godmothers.
Anyway, but our Venn diagrams intersected there.
So
as
yes,
well.
I worked in book publicity for this man, Russell Perot. And I was he was actually trying to help me solve the mystery of this burglary.
Yeah, you launched the Scooby-Doo investigation.
The Scooby-Doo investigation
instantly.
This is I will say, if I can give myself just one, this is probably the only self-compliment that I will say, is that it is, I think, the rare suspenseful grief memoir, because I do you do try to hunt down whoever took my jewelry. My joke is that I work freelance and you shouldn't mess with us. We have so much unstructured time.
No, I thought that was hilarious.
We will come and find you.
Yeah, we will find you.
No matter, we have a very special set of skills.
And there's only a 98.4% chance that it's gonna go.
It's never gonna go well. But I was complaining to him. We went out to dinner. We talked about it, and I remember he hugged me. And some of the times when you write things, the things that people think are the most hyperbolic or made up are probably the most honest and truthful. And he hugged me and he said, well, if it makes you feel any better about the jewelry, you can't take it with you when you go. And then 3 nights later, he died by suicide on his property in Connecticut. So I had already been taking notes, and then I'll throw it back to you, but I had already been taking notes really about the burglary because it's what I do. And then my sort of dark joke about this book is I call it my I'll give you something to cry about book. Yeah. And it became this much, much bigger loss.
Right. So one loss led to another loss, and then just for the sake of the perfect storm, then followed by COVID, right? Yeah. So this was
COVID.
So this was sort of your perfect storm of learning what grief is for people.
Yes, and also it matched up in a way, to get sort of like crafty, dorky about it, when I knew I would do those stages of grief was really when, after he died, you know, I referenced Joan Didion a lot in the book, and magical thinking is quite real. It is a state, and it's not like I thought if I could get my jewelry back that he would like appear like a hologram, but I did some very unreasonable things and became very obsessed with getting the jewelry back after he died. Right. And that was bargaining.
You weren't going to lose one more thing.
I wasn't going to lose one more thing.
Right. I remember there's a scene in Magical Thinking where her brother-in-law comes and her husband is dead, but she says to the brother-in-law, "Don't call his agent in LA. He's not dead in LA yet." Like just the time change meant that he was still alive for 3 more hours there in her magical thinking.
There's a lot. At some point she said, and then I don't want to divert too much, but there is a part where, and I mention it in Grief is for People too, where when I read your magical thinking, she talks about when shortly after John died, Julia Child died. And she thought, oh good, now John and Julia can have dinner in heaven. And I read it, and honestly, I mean, I love Joan Didion. I worked with Joan Didion. I was her publicist. But I also thought, all I'm getting from this paragraph is that you were friends with Julia Child when I first read it.
Yeah.
And then I read it again, and I thought, yeah, it makes total sense.
That's
makes
what I
total
thought.
sense.
That's what I thought
Yeah.
too. Isn't that funny? I thought the same thing. So that kind of leads us a little bit for a second because we're going to be all over the place.
Sorry.
You know, no, I love it. No, we're going to be interrupting each other and all over all over the place. But you were a publicist, and you make the point that, and you guys might not know this, but editors become authors and agents sometimes become authors, but publicists don't often become authors.
So what's not in the book that you might not know, which is very funny, Russell, my boss. So I worked at Vintage, which is the paperback arm. I mean, you guys are all book people, so you probably know this, a lot of you, but it's the paperback arm of Knopf, which is part of Random House. Russell had a thing where a lot of people, especially I worked for a literary agent, was my first job, and she's like, I'm never hiring another aspiring writer. There's no way I'm doing it. They can't photocopy.
Yeah.
But Russell had the sort of opposite attitude. But what's weird is he hired a bunch of writers before they became writers, so he didn't know.
Right.
He just liked us. And in the Vintage publicity department, it was me, Hanya Yanagihara, who wrote A Little Life.
Yes.
A man named Paul Yoon, who's a professor at Harvard, amazing writer, short story. Ethan Rutherford, short story author, who was in Best American. Jen Marshall, who contributed to The Bitch in the House, which was a major anthology, I think, in the early aughts.
Yeah.
There literally wasn't one of us that wasn't a writer.
So he had a type. He had a type.
I know. It's sort of disappointing when you find out that you're just one of a type.
That's funny. I kind of like that because I'm always looking for community. So you were working with people like Joan Didion. Tell me about what that experience was like for you as a young woman in New York, kind of Mary Tyler Moore, making your way, right?
With a hat.
Yeah. So what did it feel like to work for your heroes?
Oh man, that's a great question. I feel like it actually wasn't as if you get big enough, which I did at Knopf, where it's the people I'm working with, it's Philip Roth, it's Toni Morrison, it's Joan Didion. I don't know, name somebody.
Yeah, pretty much, right.
Well, also living people. Michael Chabon, Jonathan Lethem, Laurie Moore. If it's that extreme, it's no longer intimidating because it's just like a different part of the pig,
Yeah.
Like they are just a different league. And so I never really felt paralyzed. I actually just felt inspired because unlike your former end of the industry, you saw a lot of stuff that was just beginning, right? You see like a lot of unsolicited manuscripts.
Right.
I think this might be good. Mine has gone through the gauntlet where editors have edited. So in a way, it actually it's not intimidating to work with them, but it created a little bit of delusion because every book I saw was published.
Right.
Books get published.
Right.
That's what they do.
Right. But as somebody who's you're an essayist, you're a memoirist, you're a novelist. I mean, which is very rare. I was trying to think of who else I know that. I was thinking Danny Shapiro. I mean, there are not that many people that go
that's a good
that
example.
do every category like that and with such grace and appearing ease. I know it actually isn't ease. But tell us a little bit about your craft and how it was or wasn't informed by this early writing experience.
I think I got some advice from different writers, but the best advice I ever got actually, and then I can talk about the craft a little bit, but from a writer I worked with was probably Dave Eggers. And he said, finish your shit.
I like that.
That's what he said.
I like that.
Just finish it.
Yeah, that's how I feel when I have a big bowl of pasta in front of me.
Yeah.
But I like
Just
it
do
in
it.
terms of book writing as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Apply the Clean Plate Club to your laptop.
Yeah. so that stayed with you.
Finish your shit because you can always fix it later. You can, I think the thing is I started writing the way I started writing is because I worked in publishing at a time where it was far more siloed than it is now. Now people are like multi-hyphenates, across industries, within their industries, whatever it is. I thought I was going to get in trouble for writing because I'm there to promote other people's work.
Right.
So
Yeah, well, if you worked for me, you would have been in trouble.
See?
Yeah.
Just going to move this slightly over.
No, I was like, are you a writer? No.
Yes, I
Go.
know. I mean, she said that. But, well, I think she had a bad experience with a writer, my first boss. But I think that I totally lost my train of thought.
Well, you're writing. You thought you'd be in trouble for it. So it was
I
like
thought
a
I would be in trouble.
So it was
Thank
your
you.
side hustle. It was your secret
It was my
thing.
side hustle, and I my first thing I ever published, I and this is where the sort of connective tissue of book publishing helps, but it's where it started and stopped. Like truly a foot in the door and then nothing else.
Right.
But I locked myself out of 2 different apartments in the same day while moving, which was amazing.
You locked yourself out of both sides.
Both sides.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then I was moving in the same neighborhood, so it was the same like local locksmith who came. And sometimes, especially if you're writing a shorter piece, one line will throw stuff into this like sharp relief, like this texture that's provided. And I had a doormat that said deja vu frontwards and backwards. And he had a pen like this, and he was like filling out, the second $200 bill and of the day.
Yeah.
And he looks down, he goes, "It's a funny doormat."
That's amazing.
And I'm like, "I'm going to kill you / send you flowers for starting my career." So I wrote this like piece about it and sent it to a friend who worked at the Village Voice, who I did know through book publishing. I started writing for the Village Voice and wrote almost exclusively nonfiction, but like a lot of authors, had a secret novel under the desk,
Right.
Which if the desk had been anywhere near you, would have been way under the desk, buried. You would never have known.
I would have known, but go ahead.
She has eyes everywhere. And then I published my first novel after the essays, and now I have found from like a sort of craft perspective, maybe the same way you eat pasta, I feel like I'm done with, I'm sick of doing one thing and I do the other. So you have this constraint
ravenously all at once, but so
okay, so it's different.
So yours is like a little bit of a lazy Susan, right?
Yes, very well done.
I like
it's
that.
a little bit of a call and response. So basically, you get annoyed with fiction, where you're like, God, everything is my fault. All these details, everything I have to make up.
Or I've written myself into a
into a corner after so many pages and so much, plotting. You're like, man, I just wish I could have reality back. And then you write nonfiction, and then you have a different set of constraints, which is real human beings walking the earth who know what happened.
And truth, right. So are you the kind of person who goes into your writing space at 9 a.m. every day and writes to a certain, like how methodical are you? And do you have days where it's my fiction day, my essay day? This is your first memoir, probably nowhere near your last. So yeah. So how do you decide that? Is it just how the spirit moves you, or how structured are you?
I am highly motivated. So actually, this is actually connected to what we've been speaking about, because it's so funny. I'm sure everyone in this room has an experience where you think you're not in conversation with like your upbringing, your childhood, your early jobs, just because you're not doing it. And I'm like, no, you're still in conversation with it. Just because you're not imitating behavior doesn't mean you're not. Like I worked in publishing for so long, and the idea that I quit my job without like a 401k is insane for the type of person that I am. And so the amount of fear that I have is so motivating. It's really motivating. So I get up, but I do try to work early. It is really when my brain is fresh. Or when I feel like I'm not allowed. When I feel like, oh no, it's almost 6, I have to go to dinner, and then I'm like, I have a spurt.
Well, it started as your affair, and now you still like that feeling of like it's like the secret thing that you're doing.
Thing.
Yeah, I like that.
Exactly.
But so back to the book, when you quit your job in the publicity department, it was a rupture in the relationship.
Yes. I make it sound like it's like Jerry Maguire. I'm taking this fish.
Yeah.
I'm getting out of here.
Exactly. Help me, help you. Yeah.
It was a rupture in the relationship. The day I quit, it's a little bit something that's, I think a lot of things in life are like this, where they're very planned, they're very thought out, and then the actual act of them tends to be a little bit of a flick of the wrist.
Yeah.
And this odd sort of sense of spontaneity. And we had this biannual meeting, this launch meeting, where everybody talks about all the books that we're going to be publishing from every different angle, and it takes about like 7 hours. It's very long, and it sucks. And I was like, I'm not gonna go. I'm just not gonna go to that meeting. And so I walked in, and Russell came into my office and asked me if he thought we should send an author to the Midwest for her book tour. But it was really hard to sort of leave him, and I had never cried at the office. It was like a real "there's no crying in baseball" kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I looked at him, and I just like burst into hysterics, and I didn't have to say anything. And he just goes, "Oh God," and slammed the door. And I was like, "Oh my God." And it was really hard because he's one of those people. He was one of those people where you really had to. I spent every lunch, every breakfast with this person for years, but then he was difficult. He had difficulty expressing his emotions, and so I really had to chase after him constantly. It was I felt very loved, but it was a very uneven friendship. I knew that I would constantly have to be the one every month to be like, when are we getting together? When am I going to see you? Yeah. And then he would love to. The answer was yes. Yeah. He wrote back right away.
Yeah.
But you had to chase him.
Right. And there was something about the chase. I
think one of the questions that some people have asked is like what he would think of the book. Yeah. Which I think happens when you write about something. And I feel like it's taken me, again, 2 years into the publication to sort of answer really honestly, which is like, I don't know if he would read it. Yeah. And the reason why is because self-erasure. Self-erasure.
Yeah, right. Or he certainly wouldn't have talked about having read it, but...
I know he would tell other people that it was good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's really good.
Thank you.
But I think you wrote it for him.
I did. It's a eulogy. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's a really old art form in a way. I did write it for him. I got, you were talking about the different kinds of roles people play in publishing, like an editor and even in pop culture. Like if you think of like Wonder Boys, if anyone's seen that or read that, it's like the idea of the agent or the editor. Right. There are even like roles in the movies for this person. The publicist is sort of this sort of loudmouth flack that appears a little bit and leaves. And the real world is like this too. He didn't get an obituary. And my joke with this book is that I got like 200 something pages of pissed that he didn't get an obituary. And I was like, I don't think so. Yeah. Well, and I'm just glad that other people really
resonated with that. Yeah. Well, he was blessed to have a friend and a protege like you. During that period of silence, though, when you had to have the courage to say, I'm leaving, even if you just, were crying, you had the courage and you left. How did you get back into his sort of good graces, and how did the relationship change when you were no longer working for him?
It became more frank, I think, but that's sort of really hard. I mean, it's almost like it's like if you know someone hyper and you give them Ritalin, what's the difference? I mean, he
was already brutally honest, and
he was already brutally honest. I mean, he would say things that are not in the book. He was a very inappropriate, irreverent.
We were having like a little bit of a laugh upstairs in the Founders Lounge, just at how before the politically correct police came into the workplace, and especially in the entertainment business, the publishing business of New York in the 90s and the aughts. Oh my gosh. I mean, the things that bosses got away with.
But some of them needed the course correction that they had.
Oh, for sure. Oh,
but
absolutely.
But some of them also were just like, the thing is I feel like that what makes it difficult, and this is true of any sort of rule, is to see through it to the intent behind it. This is someone who argued for everyone's raises. He was a gay man who never, he didn't like lord sex over people. It wasn't, and he just loved having people up at his house in Connecticut. So that hominess, that like, oh, come to the flea market, come to like, we're going to go get pie or whatever he wanted, go meet him at a bar or whatever it was. Right. He was still like very just almost pathologically generous and social as a person. So some of those dark jokes, I'll just tell you one from the book because it's my favorite, but it's really inappropriate.
Go.
I had an assistant. You go. I won't tell you the worst one. But I had an assistant who came in at some point, and she was very, she's sort of very conservatively dressed, but very tight, wore very tight things. And she was wearing this cardigan with very sort of strained buttons. And she came into this meeting at some point, and he looked up at her. He was just sort of too quick for his own good, is really what his problem was. And he looked at her and he said, "Oh my God, it's like you walked into Talbot's and said, 'Give me the sluttiest thing you have.'" And I was like, "Oh no."
That's hilarious.
And I like pulled her over after. I'm like, if he ever says anything that bothers you, you'll let me know. And, she happened to be of the personality type where she's like, "No, it's fine." Yeah. But, he's skating on the edge.
The flip side of that is just like...
Is that it was true.
No, hilarious. Hilarious. But just like the pool parties and all that stuff. I mean, you get so much inspiration and intimacy and joy out of those kinds of those kinds of work relationships where you're all rowing in the same direction and you care so much about the same thing. And I just see my children are in their 30s and 20s, and it just would never happen like that. It's just the rules are so different, and they should be. But there is something that is lost in that. And I'm just looking at Jay Mandel here in the front row, who we worked together for 25 years or whatever in a very different world. But it would be, we'd have a dinner thing and then meet again for breakfast, and just, you keep talking, and, I know his family, he knows my family, but some of that is lost. But there is something very magical about that.
Yeah, I mean, there really was. I mean, the thing is, I always say, I feel like the book, there's always, for every book, I always feel like there's a secret structure that the author knows about. So I mentioned the 5 stages and stuff like that, but you actually kind of touched on it, which is to me, it's these sort of concentric circles that get bigger. So you have the burglary, which is like the cue ball break.
Which, by the way, we haven't even gotten to that, because the burglary is just so delicious, and the investigation and the characters, and that's a whole other thing you have to read about.
The only thing I'll say is that I don't think it's in here, but the night before I went, I saw Uncut Gems at some point, which is around the time this happened, and I remember texting a friend of mine. I'm like, I feel like I just watched a documentary about my life. So that's in the in the book, but it has these
Nancy Drew.
circles. Yeah, it has a bit of that, but there's the burglary, then there's Russell, who then really becomes sort of the North Star, obviously, throughout the book, and then you have COVID, and then really it's about the arts, and it's about the people who work behind the scenes in the arts, and a tribute to them and their sort of unsung roles. And so this is like sort of what you're talking about. We just felt we were bonded by our actual, for all the sarcasm and the Talbot's cracks, our actual genuine love of books and literature and these authors, and how protective we felt over them.
Yeah, I mean, it was like life or death. I mean, you talk about James Fry in the book and the whole Million Little Pieces, which I was dying because it was the biggest deal. I mean, literally, the guy told a lie, and it was like draw and quarter him in front of the entire world. And it's just, what a world like we live in, that lying isn't even a crime anymore. Like, I mean, it's like, I remember when I realized shit really isn't a curse anymore. And I thought, how is that possible? It was such a big deal when I was growing up. And now it's practically on like network television. And same thing is true of lying. Like, lying was the biggest deal. And it's really nothing now. But James Fry was the one.
Known liar, James Patterson.
Yeah, exactly. Never tell a lie, James Patterson. No, James Fry was like patient zero. He
wasn't. I mean, it was a sort of time period of scandals. There was, oh my gosh, why am I? J.T. Leroy.
Oh,
there was, but J.T. Leroy was more of a hoax.
Yeah,
than
full blown
scandal
thing.
Yeah. Then there was you probably got Kavya Viswanathan. Do you remember this?
Do I remember it? Sister, I represented it.
Oh, really?
I was in the center of that. This was
See, this is fun for everyone. I'm like, do
I remember that?
You're like, do I remember the thing that sent me to therapy?
She was a Harvard student in college. And I sold a first novel of hers called How Opal Maida Got Her Groove Back. Yeah.
No, not groove.
No,
yeah.
Got into. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But she wrote it in college. It was amazing. I met her parents. They were so sweet.
This before
I sold the book to Michael Peach for a life-changing amount of money for their family. And 3 days before the book's getting published, we find out she's plagiarized the entire book, but not from one book. She had memorized like 13 different books and had like lifted whole paragraphs and pages, and it was really absolutely awful. But it was front page news in every newspaper all over the world, like India Times.
Literally, you're describing ChatGPT. She's like a one-woman ChatGPT.
Yeah. In fact, her great defense was actually, poor thing, her great defense was that she had a photographic memory, and she had just read all of these books and had just memorized all this stuff and not realized it. I mean, it's interesting that you bring her up because at that time I said to Jay, this is the worst thing that ever happened to me. How spoiled am I? It's like my name, like, 4 paragraphs down, it's like, can you believe this is happening to me? But anyway.
But it did feel, no, but it felt like that period of time, and it's about the same period of time. It did feel like a sort of collective bubble bursting. And in the book, I talk about how it did actually affect Russell. I'm not blaming, get this out of here. Get this out of the way. I am not blaming James Fry for Russell's death. But it's just like there was a disillusionment time period where it had been this thing where like he was so gifted
as a cheerleader
but at making people read what he wanted them to read.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first got into publishing, I don't know about you, but when I first got into publishing, I had this real delusion that I was like, this is about literacy. I'm like, people will read again.
Yeah.
And then it turns out it's extremely hard to get people who identify as readers to buy books.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, we have I can't get past first base. And Russell never lost the feeling of like, this is like a quirky paperback original. I'm going to get it on the cover of the New York Times Book Review and everyone's going to know what it is. And he did it again.
Yeah, well, he was a real tastemaker.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, like when this became the big thing that people were like, could lie or plagiarize or whatever it was, part of it was that the idea of memoir was still somewhat new. I mean, we knew what an autobiography was, right? But a memoir, there was some
new to us, not to the French.
Yeah, not to the French, but here in America, tell the truth but tell it slant. There was a gray area with memoir where it was like you're crafting the story for your purposes, and I think to the public there was no difference between an autobiography and memoir, but like there is a difference, right?
No, it's huge, and it's also weird when people, especially if you write nonfiction. If anyone here is interested in writing nonfiction, especially first-person narrative nonfiction, and you get it published, it's great because you don't need to go to therapy anymore because, like, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune will tell you what the hell is wrong with you. And it's like amazing, and I'm like, oh, great, this is amazing.
Teacher, yeah.
Thank you. But the thing is, people will sometimes read this, which is a story of our friendship, and I was very careful about that. That was my guardrail. Is like, how does this affect, frankly, my grief and stuff, and our relationship, and without, occasionally you have to sort of tiptoe a little out of that box to be like, here are some facts of this person's life. Here's what I know that I wasn't there for. But this is not a biography of Russell.
Right, exactly.
And
that's the difference of biography, autobiography versus.
It's my impression, memoir, my memory of this.
Right,
right. So it's like not,
Right. So, whether or not James Fry got Novocaine when he had his. When he had his
he
dental
absolutely
surgery.
did not. I've seen his dental records.
I mean, we were all up in arms about that. But anyway, so it was very funny to have that little cameo.
There's a little
cameo. A little James Fry cameo.
It is little. Well, just because at a certain point, especially when you're writing about someone who's not famous, right? This is not. I did an event in LA day before yesterday with Lori Wolover, who wrote about her relationship with Anthony Bourdain. It's really much more about her like childhood, but it's Anthony Bourdain. So they put that on the cover, right?
Right.
But there's a shorthand, and there's no shorthand for Russell. So you have to sort of produce specific stories so that people fall in love with him like I did, and then their hearts are broken like mine was,
right. So, okay, beautiful. What was the biggest challenge for you then in that crafting of that, the scaffolding that you had to create?
Yeah. I think it was really in the writing of it. There are actually, I'm not a particularly like mushy person.
Get that.
Yeah, I'm like, oh,
you can see that in this book, you're sort of new to the depth of emotion that you're experiencing. And that's why I brought up that anger thing.
Yeah.
Which is funny because you're like, no, I don't feel it that way.
I don't feel that way. But it's everywhere. It's all over your skin. You're like, I can't find it. It's the forest dum-dum.
Yeah.
Like,
No, but I get it because I get it that you're sort of like a kind of person who's move forward, move forward.
I'm a humorist.
And
not a humorist in the like sort of like, red nose sense, but enough that I feel like, to me, I always think of a thing, and then I'll this is a long way to answer your question, But the author Jim Crace, does everyone know?
I
Does
do.
anyone you know who Jim Crace is? You might not know him because he wrote about I think like 9 novels. Big British art author, had the great misfortune of announcing his retirement the day Philip Roth announced his retirement.
It's like dying on September 11th in
Yeah.
an unrelated
In
incident.
an unrelated
Yeah,
incident.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, Farrah Fawcett died the same day as Michael Jackson.
Yeah, right.
You know, what are you gonna do? Point is that Jim Crace, I remember seeing, had a really good he did a talk at the National Arts Club in New York. He said, never forget as a writer, your duty is to entertain people. You know, there's a desert island and there's a writer, and a carpenter and a chef. You get eaten. You know? So never forget this. And I feel like I really have always taken it to heart. And by the way, depressing people is entertainment in a way. You don't have to
laughter
be a
through
dancing
tears
monkey.
is the best,
But
right?
it's how I express myself. So it was really, so one of the challenges of the book, a long way to answer your question, was to wind back the jokes occasionally, really go for it, sort of be vulnerable, sort of. And then there are certain lines in the book that I also did the audiobook of this, that I will probably never say out loud again.
Yeah.
Because there are certain lines that I remember writing them, and like even writing them, thinking about them right now, editing them. They're just lines. It's not a whole section, but there's like 2 or 3 that I just like, I'll lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. I mean, then there's so many lines that just get laughter through tears. You know, we weren't depressed all the time. We were drunk sometimes too. It's like, yeah, it's just so
I'm sure that's
just,
true here. COVID
yeah.
happened.
Yeah. No, but you're really the queen of that quick quip that's
Oh, thank
cuts
you.
to the core and really illuminates a truth. And but it did seem like you were wrestling with vulnerability here, and I was wondering, did you have a vulnerability hangover, as Brene Brown talks about?
Oh, really? Does
yeah,
she?
yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, but not the same as I do at like every party I've ever been to, where you walk away and you're like, "What did I do? What did I say?" Fran Lebowitz once told me that she goes, the best thing about getting well known is that you can have an awkward conversation with someone at a party and they walk away thinking it's their fault. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that is like, if
That
you, that
sounds
is
good.
more than like money and like notoriety and ego. Like, what a great reason to get famous.
Yeah.
You just be as weird as you want, and they're like, oh, I really embarrassed myself in front of that person.
I
I'm
blew
like,
it. I blew it.
That's amazing. I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, the best advice I ever got about that was that everybody goes home and thinks about what they said. Nobody goes home and thinks about what you said, and it's so true. And then they had that study about they made a kid in college wear an Elton John T-shirt to like a frat party, and then they interviewed him, and they were like, I've lost all my friends, I've lost all my cool, nobody spoke to me all night. You know, then they interviewed every single person at the frat party, and not one single person remembered him wearing an Elton John
Why
T-shirt.
is the Elton John? What's wrong? Why is that the hinge?
Just was like an uncool thing to do.
Divisive thing.
It's
is
a very
the Elton
uncool
John
thing to
t-shirt.
do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, for a heterosexual frat
Yeah.
boy, I don't know. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
it was.
Yeah,
I
okay.
mean, this is an old study, so you know. But yeah, but the vulnerability. I wonder how that's going to affect your writing going forward. So, what are you? You
back
say
into
I
the
am.
shell.
Yeah, you say I am a humorist, right? That's a label that you wear and that you wear well, and you wear some other labels as well. So how has this changed the fit of those labels for you?
I mean, I don't have a great answer because you're supposed to sort of, not as even as a writer, but as a human being, grow. I think. But as a writer, the thing is I had 3 books of humor essays before this, so the sort of like wiring tranche, whatever, you know, the sort of pipe of humor has been sort of, to me, what this is same old person, but instead of chewing with the same voice that I have, instead of the meal being a humorous incident like getting fired from a volunteer job, which I did.
My daughter did too.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Child Mind Institute.
Where? Child
Mind Institute.
Oh, okay, mine was
she's a pediatric neurologist now, so it
really?
worked out okay
so is
for
my
her.
uncle. We'll talk about it later. But yeah, mine was at the butterfly exhibit at the Museum of Natural History. They die. I don't know. Anyway, but it's always. But this is, I'm like gesturing at this because this seems like that same voice, but tackling something that is objectively so tragic and objectively trying to wrestle. I think what might continue on is wrestling with bigger and bigger topics and more common topics, because I think as a writer that can be very scary. It can be very scary to write about, I don't know, love, the Civil War, who hasn't done it already, right? So what's your angle?
Right.
And so writing about death and suicide was a little scary because I'm like, what do I have to say?
Turns out you have a lot to say.
And then it turned out quite a bit.
And I'm imagining, because you have been witnessed in your full humanity by writing this, you've also probably been met by an audience member who wants to be witnessed in their full humanity. And that reciprocity must have been an unusual and new experience for you.
That is, yeah.
So tell me about some of the experiences you had on the road, especially with the hardcover.
Yeah, my gosh, that is a very good question, which sounds like I'm filibustering. I'm so happy you asked that.
Funny you should
Funny
say.
you should say. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, I love your shirt. But no, I mean, it has been both in my inbox and in person something totally different. So in the inbox, I'm used to either some aspiring writers, some men who will be very passive aggressive and weird, like they read The Game or something. They're like, your writing reminds me a lot of the blogs I used to do. I'm like, what is that? What's the goal here? And then the letters that came with this book, they were tremendous. No, all of them were very well written, not by crazy people, very beautiful, but very intense. They would often say, attached is an obituary of my friend, because especially they were all about people who had lost someone to suicide. And so much of this book is about losing a friend to suicide, which there aren't that many. Anne Patchett's Truth and Beauty is one of them.
And there's not a name for it. You're not a widow or an orphan.
No, but it is, in a way, it's, Russell didn't have to keep in touch with me. I'm not his blood, and we both chose each other again and again in that way.
Found family. It's
exactly.
so powerful. Yeah,
it truly is. But in person, at first I didn't know what to do, and then I realized that like the best thing you can tell someone is to take it from them right away. So I'm sorry for your loss is a very good thing to say. I might say it tonight. I've said it before. It's a knee-jerk thing, and it's true. But the best thing is just thank you for telling me that. I'm so glad you told me that.
Yeah.
Because people are already out on a limb telling you their story, and they're not professional writers, but something in what you wrote tripped a wire in them. And so I feel like saying like, it's okay, you don't have to have this all by you've done enough. I will now take the
I'll carry this
baton.
with you. Yeah, I think people really want to be seen, and the power of storytelling is to find yourself in somebody else's story.
It's also weird that it's the more detailed it is, because I don't know how many people so far of all the letters and the people who've come to events, not one person has been burglarized and then had their best friend die by suicide.
That is unique, but
There's
maybe
always
maybe your doppelganger is here tonight.
Like,
so
but, so you get specific, and so in a way you just sort of take this leap where you're like, maybe someone will relate to it, and I'm lucky that they have.
I love that. It's beautiful and brave. So let's open it up to our audience and see what kind of questions
comments
you guys have.
Or answers. We'll accept them.
Don't be shy. Craft questions, anything.
Yeah, anything.
I have a question.
Oh, hi.
I noticed in the book that you didn't talk to the partner of Russell, and I just was wondering, kind of craft and reporting-wise, like how was that decision, and why did you make that decision, and then how did you wrestle with being okay with that? I mean, I think it was, I think it was a brave choice and not at all the wrong one, but it was like a brave one.
That's a good question.
So
I'm going to repeat it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just for fun. So the question was, you said you noticed in the book that I didn't talk to Russell's partner, and what was that like? And was that a choice that I made? I did talk to his partner. I think, in the past, the sort of rule of thumb, especially with nonfiction, where there's just like a little bit of writing about somebody and it's an incident, you went to dinner, it's funny, haha, it's in an essay. You ask for forgiveness and not permission. It's up for grabs. It's the sort of price of knowing a writer. This is different. I sent him a manuscript, and so I could have sent a galley, which does everyone know? Yeah, everyone knows what this is. I could have sent, like, the galley is the sort of books that the pre-books they send out to reviewers and booksellers, and the manuscript is what it sounds like. So I sent him that.
Galleys can still be changed, but
yes, thank you. Yes, galleys. It's hard to change. But a manuscript is flexible, and I sent it to him. And at first, he didn't want to give me any notes on it. We had a really beautiful, lovely exchange, and I made him I was like, if I was sending you this as an FYI, I would have sent you the galley. But I'm sending it to you because, and the only way I got him to do it, he's a lovely, lovely human being, was to tell him that I needed his help. And I was like, help me and not look like a jerk. And he's like, here are some spots that are uncomfortable for me. And I changed them and they made the book better. So he's just not in the book because it's not his story, but he was very much consulted. Yeah.
That's a very satisfying answer, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm not just because it is so. Well, that's the weird thing about friendship. I know Ann Patchett had difficulty with this with like Lucy Greerley's family in Truth and Beauty. Like it's messier when you don't have like a sort of societal, like understood bond, legal bond with that person.
Yeah, I know Kate Spade's business partner, not Pamela, but the other one wrote a book and it kind of it broke people apart.
It's messy.
Yeah, it's tough.
This one I have been extremely lucky.
Well, mostly because
him and his mother. His mother and his partner are the two people who saw the manuscript, which was a first for me. Yeah.
Anybody else? Riley?
Do you want to go first?
No, I'll do the order.
Oh yeah, I was about to say I have no power. I don't have any authority. Oh no, I have no authority. I'm not pointing.
No, I do the pointing.
You do the pointing.
When
I
you
do
have
the
a
pointing.
bookstore, you can do the pointing.
You're right.
I'm curious what you learned from writing the book. Like as readers, we learn from your writing. But what did you learn? What did you gain?
The question is, what did I learn from the writing of the book? I think that, there's things in the book that I always feel like everything you need to know, like through expressions, like don't judge a book by its cover when you're little, and then you spend the rest of your life applying. You're like, oh, yeah, that's still true. That thing from 4th grade, that's still true, and you spend the rest of your life with it. And a lot of the book, I talk about the concept of catharsis, and I quote Natalia Ginzburg, the Italian author, about how you can't hope to be soothed by your profession. And I'm like, there's no catharsis. I think I kind of hoped there would be. I hoped I was lying. And no, I feel like the second I was done writing it, I sent it in and I thought, okay, like now we can begin. Like I had delayed something to write the book and started over. And that's not that promising. But other people especially who write about grief, who I've now met a lot of them, who write about grief memoirs, have a totally different view on it, who really feel like they got something out. But I think for this, I've just added another layer, another dimension to this person I miss, which is wonderful, but I don't feel better.
Thank you. Okay. Wait, no. Was it you that she called on before? Okay, you.
Oh my God.
Said something really interesting. I just wondered if you could tell us when that came to you. And you were comparing the sudden loss of your friend versus like anticipatory grief. And you said one is leaving your keys at home and the other is locking them in your car. And it just really stopped me. So I wondered, did that come to you in your grief or in your writing?
Oh, the analogy. Okay, there's a bit in the book where I talk about the difference between sort of sudden loss and anticipated loss. And one of the things I say is it's sort of math, you work backwards versus forwards. What did I miss? What was the last thing that was said? That kind of thing. And so that doesn't mostly applies to suicide, but also can apply to people who have heart attacks, But your question was really about the analogy of saying that it's the difference. I mean, now it doesn't really work with the way cars are now, I think. I don't think it's like really hard to lock yourself out of your car. So it's like sort of a moot point.
You aged yourself.
I've aged myself. I was like, that's really work. And I was like, you take a token, you go on the subway. No, it's just, sorry. But it, the idea that like, it's the frustration of a sudden loss is like, I can see through the window of the car window. My keys are right there. And it felt like, that there was this sort of kind of translucent bubble around everything after someone dies, and you're like, if I just knew the secret of where to press, like truly physically, I could drag Russell back in, especially for someone who has so violently taken themselves out. But I tend to speak in analogies, as is probably apparent. And so I don't mean to like, oh, this old thing but that is sort of, it came as I was writing as an analogy for what frustration feels like.
Oh, wait.
I'm
so
not
we had
allowed.
somebody here
Yes,
first.
I'm
Yeah,
not-
you're
I'm-
not the picker.
I have no
Yes.
prowess.
Um,
I'm using the little power I have.
Yeah, please.
I'm curious how long it's been since Russell died.
So he died on June 27th. Not this June. Mm-hmm. 5 years, almost 6 years.
Almost 6
Yeah,
years.
almost 6 years.
How are you doing in the grieving process?
I don't. It's interesting. So the question was, how am I doing on the grieving process? I think I have learned to plug into phrases like the grieving process without my skin burning off. I've learned that, like, when someone dies who, you're very close to, it feels like this is your special snowflake. And then anything anyone tells you, any book they send you, the language of this, you're like, that doesn't apply to me because they were my special snowflake. And, by the sort of law of syllogism, our friendship was like that. Our relationship was like that. It doesn't apply to me. And now I think, especially after writing the book, and maybe that's an answer to the question of how things have changed, I am now more willing to be like, this is still a process, and I can like listen to other people who have like gone through similar things without thinking, yeah, but my person.
Right.
It's a sort of selfish time period when someone dies. And I've become less selfish about it.
Yeah, so you're more comfortable on the mourner's bench, like
Yeah.
it has a beginning but no end, and you're like, okay, here
And
we
I'm
are
like,
on the
yeah,
bench.
here we
I get
are.
it.
It
I'm
never
on the
goes
bench.
away.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what happens is your life grows around it, right? I'm sure everyone here has experienced some kind of loss, and what happens is that it takes a really long time to realize that like not everything got damaged in the accident,
Right.
and you just grow around
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
it doesn't go away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Somebody in the back?
Yeah, extremely related. How do you feel? Yeah.
Now, how do I feel?
Right.
Peckish.
We'll feed you. We'll feed you.
I mean, the truth is that what happens is I described the restaurant that I saw Russell in the night we had dinner last. I still live in the same place. And so I see it all the time. It's an unavoidable place. It is on a corner and it is made of windows. So I can really just see exactly where we sit. It's like the set of a play. Do you know what I mean? I can just like really see it. And it's completely unavoidable unless I do like the Zoolander thing and I'm like, I don't turn left. So I do think, so anytime something really bad or something really good happens, I find it sparks up. So when there's very good news or very terrible news, I do have this rush, like no time has passed, like it has not been 6 years. And I'm like, where are you? But mostly I'm fine.
Do you still dream about him?
No, I don't. It's sad. I kind of
No,
miss those. They're
no.
horrible when it first
Yeah,
happens,
no,
where you
but
just hear their voice.
I think that's a process too.
I don't.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
They're beautifully rendered here.
Thank you.
All right, we have time for one more question.
Or comment or criticism.
No,
Don't limit
no
yourself.
criticisms. No criticisms. I'll use my pointing power to point you out.
One more.
Okay, one more? Okay, thank you.
I look back, my mom died last year, and I look back and I was a huge asshole to people before I had gone through it myself. I'm sorry for your loss, or like, oh, she was old, any of those. Like you kind of want to like pat somebody on the back and be like, oh, that sounds really sad. Death has been happening for generations. What are some of your go-to phrases that see somebody in their loss? I know you said like, thank you for telling me, but.
I'm going to answer this question by this wonderful woman and former asshole. Yes. Okay, great. Like she's I don't know. But no.
I'm sorry.
But the question. No. But I am. But the question is actually no. But very seriously, it's actually, I think it takes a lot to even say that you used to behave badly. But feeling like sort of disconnected, I guess, from people until you experience this big loss. And your mother died last year. I'm sorry. I think, like I said, you do thank people for telling you. And I think what you start to know is, so I'll answer abstractly and then practically, what you start to know is how long it actually takes. So it's not even I don't know what the depth of someone else's feeling is. I don't pretend to know. But I know that especially in the moments like after it happens or when you first find out and other people first find out, in a weird way, I think you probably weren't an asshole because that's actually the time to just be like, I'm sorry. That the practical thing that I have learned is every time someone experiences a loss now, even though I don't know how cars work, apparently, I do know how phones work. And I set an alarm on my phone for a month from then to check in, or like 3 weeks. Just be like, check in with that person because all the people like me have died down. All the, I'm so sorry. Oh my God, did you hear about so-and-so's mother? Blah, 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 blah. They're gone now. Or they're trickling down, and then they go back then because that's when they feel alone and they understand they're starting to understand what's happened.
Yeah. There is a funny but so true moment where a friend calls you to give you her condolences, but she's making vinegar and like she's multitasking and there's so much sound going on, and finally you're like, I'm sorry, I just can't, and you hang up the phone. Just can't.
Wait, I have to actually address that very quickly.
Yeah, I loved that.
Because okay, so basically it's like a friend is this is my phase when I was being sort of a jerk to people, because I feel like some of this is about like the mourning person is not on your side because they would give anything, and I mean anything, to get their person back. So they're not on the side of the living, is how I
It's
kind
like a
of
drowning
phrase it.
person who will drag down
Yes.
the person who's trying to
Absolutely.
save them. Right.
Absolutely. And I will say, only because she's super cool with it and we're having drinks next week. A friend of mine was bottling vinegar. I barely knew her at the time.
She was crafting.
And it was like so loud. It was like a bottling. It was like, I was like, are you in the Ford factory? Where are you? And I could barely hear her. And I'm like, you are multitasking a condolence call. There's like a Seinfeld episode about this. I don't have to deal with this shit. And I was like, no. And then what I did not know, because she tends to be kind of like a crafty person, she's a very successful vinegar business. It's called Tart Vinegar. She's great. I didn't know this, but people have subsequently read the book and been like, is this you? Like, who else will be bottling massive quantities of vinegar?
So
but we're cool. She knows she did it.
Yeah.
It's fine.
So your point is she was just at work.
But I didn't know that.
Yeah,
at that
I don't
point,
actually,
she was just like whittling things.
That doesn't make it okay.
No,
for
she
me.
also
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
she
yeah.
was like, I'm just sorry. It's fine. But it's fine. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It's wonderful vinegar, really.
But
it's very good. It's called Tart.
Yeah, there is something very freeing about the early stage of mourning where you can just say to somebody, I just can't.
I can't.
And goodbye.
I
So-
did a little bit, but every once in a while, people say, especially around suicide, people say outrageous things to you. The biggest thing that was hard is for me, and if I could give you a tip, if you either are someone or know someone who's suffered like this, did you know is a tough one for me personally. I found. Because I'm like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I did know I didn't do anything.
Yeah, there's an
psychic.
accusation, there's a
It's
judgment.
also such ego. I was like, I can't stop a 52-year-old cogent man from like, I'm not a linebacker. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
there's a
that's
blame.
judgment. Yeah, there's
in it.
judgment and
It's
there's-
weird. Yeah.
That's actually
Did you know? I say no. No, yeah. I mean, if I was going to be I think people are just sort of shocked by it. They're scared by suicide. They're scared for themselves that this is possibly an option that we have.
They
want to
be inoculated, so it's like
they want to be inoculated.
yeah.
How do I find out from you, like me, in this moment? How do I almost like mine this person in grief to see if I can inoculate myself against my own people in my life who are suffering?
Right.
And I'm like, it's different. You can't. If I was a real jerk, I would be like, yeah, I knew. You know what I mean? Like, but I'm not.
Yeah, but that's actually very helpful.
Yeah, you can't.
Because it's a knee-jerk thing. I mean, someone's house burns down, and you're like, "Well, was it an electrical fire?" It's like you're not asking about the house. You're trying to find out,
You're
like,
trying to find
how
out.
to avoid your house burning.
What
down.
do I go home? What what kind of sensor did you not have in the house? Yeah.
So wonderful.
A joy.
Thank
This
you
is the
so
best
much.
bookstore.
Well,
This
thank
is
you.
crazy.
Thank you. Now, I have one last question for you,
sorry.
which is we define Godmothers not as a religious distinction necessarily, although it could be, but just somebody who pioneered a path or advocated for you or watered the magic seeds inside of you. So I'm just wondering, is there a godmother that comes to your mind when you think about that? And if so, can you share her name and a little something?
Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of writers I look up to, of course. but I'll answer from a writing perspective because I feel like I had a lot of women in my life. I have a sister, mother, grandmother, one who was terrible and one who was wonderful. So maybe that's a bad answer to your question. But I had a professor in college where I thought maybe I wanted to change my major to English to writing. I wasn't sure. And I wrote this story that I felt was like a cool story. That was this sort of like, if you can imagine, like this like poor man's imitation of Bret Easton Ellis. It was like a suburban bloodbath thing. And I handed it in, and she had this great Southern accent, which unfortunately now, because I'm telling the story, I have to do. But she's like, Sloane, can I see you after class? And I'm like, oh my God, she thinks it's real. I am so talented. She thinks I shot up a bunch of people, and I'm like, this is very good. And so I sat across from her in her office, and she had the story in front of her, and she was like, darling, she's like, somebody up there gave you something, but you have no idea what to do with it. Brilliant. And then she goes and she taps the paper like it's a job offer in like 1980, and she's like, this isn't it. And then just like slid across.
Right. But all you heard is somebody gave you something.
Somebody gave me something. And then she was a wonderful professor. The stories she made us read, she just I felt like she told me, she's like, you don't have to wait to be great. You can not think of yourself like that. And from an ego perspective, you probably never should. But you don't have to wait to like play up. That's and like really be good.
That's so good.
She was
Do you remember her name?
Oh yeah, Blanche Boyd.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, Blanche Boyd. She's wonderful.
But a lot of times the stories are really about somebody who told you had something special, but then kind of also put you on a slightly different path.
Yeah, everyone tells this story.
No, but even my story is one of my stories is about a teacher saying to me, I came in late to the class, and she said to me, stop right there. Don't make an excuse. I know you're famous for having a way with words, but it's not going to work for me. And all I heard was famous for having a way with words. And so, so I think it's That's interesting because it's like they're taking their magic wand and they're anointing you, but they're also directing you.
They're directing you.
Yeah.
She's like, this isn't the direction. She goes, why don't you start writing like you and see what that might be like?
Yeah, right from your own experience.
And I just felt it gave me, it's not like I didn't have value walking around, but it gave me value in the department where I most needed it.
And it gave you permission to use your own voice.
It did.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, luckily for all of us that Blanche
you.
was there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, honey.
Thank you for coming.
Sloane will be signing this, I guess, up here.
Yeah.
Oh, where do I go? They're gonna bring our.
Oh, here. Okay, great. Is this?
Yeah.
And that. Did it work? It's on. Oh, it's still on.